Brendan Howlin now, please.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. Yesterday we heard from Minister Paschal Donohoe a budget without a purpose. I believe it was weak. I think it was a conservative budget. There was no vision attached to it, and there should have been one. Budget 2019 is not like recent budgets. This was the first budget since 2007 where the government genuinely had real scope to bring about positive social change. The recovery of the economy, for which so many people suffered and worked so hard, has paid off with high employment and healthy public finances, giving this particular government at this particular time a huge opportunity to answer the vital question about our future. What next? We need new ideas for the economy because we're running out of time for corporation tax to attract foreign direct investment. Both the OECD BEPS process and the European Union's push for common standards will ultimately reduce the unique advantage of the Irish taxation system. And many countries have simply reduced their own corporation tax rates, which reduces the relative attractiveness to Ireland in any event. In Budget 2019, we should have heard leadership on the future of our society. The government could have earmarked €5 billion, as we proposed, from the Irish Strategic Investment Fund to build 25,000 affordable houses. That would be dramatic. That would be visionary. We could have signalled to everyone that this will be a country that helps ordinary people to meet the cost of living. But the government has just signalled more of the same. A little extra money for the same failed housing policies. Tax breaks for landlords, subsidised for private developers. Now, where did we hear that before? With much council housing announced again and again as social housing to be leased from private owners, not added to the council housing stock. The government could have introduced a balanced package of measures to tackle climate change on a week where major reports reiterated the urgency and seriousness of the global temperature rise. That would have demonstrated that we're going to catch up on our emissions targets that have had and will continue to have devastating impacts on our world. But the government fudged it by presenting secondary measures that failed to address the big issues, which is that we need to use strong policies like carbon taxes to redirect economic activity in a wholly new direction if our current way of life into the future is to be sustainable. The government could have introduced a plan to transform childcare and preschool education, or to finally implement the Sláintecare plans. That would have set out a purpose, a vision for the budget. It would have shown that this will be a country where no one is left behind, where every child and every patient is given the best possible assistance with their quality of life. But the government has just allocated small pots of money for a variety of individual projects, a little here, a little there, no grand plan. There's nothing to give people confidence that public services are on a pathway towards a higher standard, the ones that we aspire to, that we look at enviously across Northern Europe. From a Labour Party perspective, we have a very clear vision about what the budget should do. The budget should help people. It should help people who have kept faith with government through the hard times, who rely on government to be honest with resources, tell them what truly is available, and to give them a fair benefit from those available resources. There was a time when the budget was a genuine national endeavour. In the past, budgets were about honesty, about showing the people collectively what they've contributed to the state and explaining what we could achieve together by combining our resources to build schools, to fund hospitals, to provide income supports to those who need assistance. Budgets used to be about including everyone as citizens, in vindicating their citizenship of this country. But this government has made it clear that many people are being left to fend for themselves in a market economy where predatory landlords or vulture funds are ruining lives. The budget should help people to help themselves by giving them a secure base, affordable homes, affordable childcare, and a genuine safety net in the form of health services, welfare payments, disability supports when they are needed. The duty of the state is to provide for people, to provide them with what our Uachtaráin used to call a floor of decency, a solid foundation that allows them to move forward with confidence, to make choices for themselves, and to feel empowered to deal with the challenges that we all face in our lives. The budget is funded from public money. We're all taxpayers. Those on the lowest incomes pay as great a proportion of their incomes in indirect taxes as those on higher incomes pay in indirect and direct taxes combined. Yet the government has taken up a narrative that I've seen repeated over the last number of weeks, supported by Fianna Fáil, that people paying direct income taxes are somehow more unfairly treated compared to those who are required to pay high indirect taxes. And the facts, the analysis, just doesn't bear that out. The budget, funded by all citizens, should provide universal benefits for all citizens. The purpose of the budget should be to bring about a more equal society, not, as this government has done, to reinforce the existing economic inequality that is increasingly visible in the form of housing and people's lifestyles. The budget should give us a unity of purpose, not, as this government has done, sending everyone to go to their online calculator to work out what their individual benefit will be personally for them, regardless of the consequences for others or of society in general. A mature budget process, such as we see in countries like Denmark and the Netherlands, should have provided us with a picture of what kind of country we actually aspire to, the vision of where we're going. Where was the aspiration? Where is the sense of direction? Imagine if in 10 years' time we had an ecologically sound economy, a zero carbon emissions in our cities like Copenhagen, that Copenhagen will achieve by 2025. Imagine strong supports for traditional culture, the contemporary arts, and true social inclusion that will allow every citizen to feel at peace with everyone else and to feel that life for them afforded personal dignity, not jealous or angry or afraid, which are signs of a breakdown in social cohesion and of shared or common purpose. Labour's vision is to return the conversation to what we can do together as a single people, le céile, and what good can be achieved collectively. The best of our people are more concerned with what they can do to assist others, asking nothing in return. The best of us seeks to improve other people's lives and to see how we can make our communities and our world a better place. And that's what the budget should have set out to do. The job of the government is to provide people with a vision, a sense of direction, a sense of purpose towards a better future. But maybe I'm being unfair. Maybe the government has been, in fact, honest in laying out their vision. Fine Gael will tell us that they are rewarding achievement. That's why those on higher incomes or those with high levels of family wealth have been rewarded by cuts in income tax that will only benefit the top 20%, or cuts to inheritance tax that only will have a positive impact on 10% of our people. Fine Gael will tell us that they are supporting ambition. They're promoting an economic system based on individualism, where the strong will do better always than the weak. They've done little to change an unequal playing field for the many people who are born with material disadvantage or with disabilities. Fine Gael would tell us that they're empowering people to be successful. But the Fine Gael vision of opportunity for all is really just a way of fostering competition between our people. You're all on a fair run, but if you're handicapped at the start, well, that's tough. Fine Gael's vision is about rewarding social status and the existing structures of social power. That's why the budget includes measures that are carefully crafted to reduce income and wealth inequality by not 1 cent. Fine Gael seems to be quietly satisfied with the way things are. People in big houses seeking to pay less taxes. People in small flats, if they can afford them at all, struggling to pay rising rents. And nearly 10,000 people who are homeless, including, shamefully, 3,700 children. Fine Gael has demonstrated that they're expert at least one art of government, and that's the art of image. Fine Gael presents themselves as the new centre party. That's the focus and look that they're after. But the Fine Gael vision of the centre is one that preserves the existing divides. Fine Gael's communication advisors have been trying to find the right spin for this lacklustre budget. They've tried calling it a budget for children and families. It isn't. A budget for children and families would include measures to benefit all of the children of the country with universal services, not meagre tokenistic measures. Fine Gael have tried calling it a budget for housing and healthcare. It isn't. If resourcing healthcare really was a priority, after 8 years of Fine Gael health ministers, 8 years, we would now have a handle on both inputs and outcomes in the health services, and we don't. Budget 2019 was the test of the government's claim to be the new centre of Irish politics. The image consultants who devised that particular strategy will have to go back to the drawing board, because when we look at who benefits from Budget 2019, it's not the people at the centre of Irish society. The median age of our people is 37. Half of our people are older, half of our people are younger than that. So if we consider a 37-year-old at the middle of Irish society, what is their experience? What are their concerns? Well, they're concerned about climate change. Younger generations understand that. They get it. This government got it wrong by not raising carbon taxes as promised and by failing to prioritise climate action. They're passing the cost on to the next generation. By failing to heed the urgent reports on the need for drastic action, the government has failed on the greatest single issue facing humanity. And since Fianna Fáil's spokesperson made a point of attacking Fine Gael on climate change, let them share the blame too. Fianna Fáil have made it clear that their confidence and supply deal with Fine Gael has resulted in a series of tax cuts and spending measures that Fianna Fáil demanded. But they obviously didn't include climate action. Fianna Fáil decided to use their influence on different priorities. Our 37-year-old was 26 when the economy collapsed. Some in that category have had several years of work under their belts by now. Others have just been finished studying and are trying to start off in their professional lives or in their work for the first time. Very few of them were homeowners back in 2008, and relatively few of them have become homeowners since, due to the barely controlled rise in the amazing increase in rents that have absorbed so much of their incomes in the last number of years. While many of our citizens are hell-bent on recouping their losses from the economic collapse, regardless of how that affects the chances of the next generation. Policies and practices that have driven house prices up again have locked a generation out of the security of owning their own homes. For 37-year-olds, The rainy day fund makes no sense. A rainy day fund may sound prudent, and it's designed to achieve that objective. But taking €1.5 billion from an actual strategic investment fund, an actual buffer for the state, and changing its name on paper, not creating any new money, and where will it be invested? Taking €500 million out of tax revenue to fund this is the new policy to give us the view of prudence. But young families want to be able to afford a house now. They're holding off starting a family. They're waiting for a family home. And they see no likelihood of gaining access to an affordable home when they need it, right now, not at some future date. Those who are renting can only see the rent going up faster than their income. Even those with good money feel insecure about the tenancies they have in rented property, and they feel insecure about starting a family. The depth of insecurity created by our dysfunctional housing system is causing deep and lasting damage to the cohesion of our society itself. And that must be clear to everybody in this House. Our 37-year-olds are well educated. They're not going to fall for the weasel words of the Minister yesterday that more houses will be built next year than any time in the last decade. We've come through a disastrous decade of economic collapse. That's an idle boast. And the miserable €300 million over 3 years for a so-called affordable housing scheme is highly suspect. 6,000 households, we're told, will benefit. That's 3,000 a year. Sorry, 2,000 a year. 2,000 a year. That's a tiny number. A tiny number for the thousands of families who are looking to buy a house, an affordable house right now. And how will they be chosen, this lucky 2,000 a year? Will this involve giving again public land for private development? This is not a sustainable or adequate solution to the housing crisis, but I think you know that. The scale is totally wrong. Tens of thousands of affordable housing and what we used to call council houses are needed. And you know that too, and you know that only the state can provide that. State building of homes requires very significant levels of investment. Really, the same approach to the housing crisis that we brought to bear on the economic crisis. Labour would have created a new fund, not a rainy day fund, but we would invest €16 billion, as we set out in clear terms, to build 80,000 homes in 5 years. We would dedicate €5 billion from the Ireland Strategic Investment Fund, €3 billion from tax revenues over the next 5 years, and create an investment vehicle, a national housing development bank, that would permit pension funds, credit unions who are anxious to do it, they're in touch with us, and the European Investment Bank to invest in housing. Labour's investment would be economically sustainable. We would rent homes to all comers, provide local government with a revenue stream that will recover the whole cost and permit the building of further affordable and social houses into future generations as a revolving fund. 17 billion investment in health is a necessary investment. We don't argue with that. But the government has failed to provide accountability. And I know that the Taoiseach, and I'm sure the Minister for Finance, is concerned about this. The accountability. What is the state getting for that 17 billion? Fianna Fáil has increased privatisation of the health system by pushing this vehicle that they think is the magic solution, the treatment purchase scheme. The treatment purchase scheme is simply a way of privatising the public list. I remember when we had housing pressures when I was Minister for Health many, many moons ago. What we did then was we allocated a pool of money to public hospitals and said, if we provided an additional pool of money, bid for it. How many additional procedures can you provide? And we cleared waiting lists like that. When Fianna Fáil and the Progressive Democrats came in, they came in with this notion of co-located hospitals and privatised medicine. And that's where the treatment fund came in. We need to create the capacity within the public system to deal with public lists. The notion that you run up public lists to a degree that you simply privatise the list is the wrong way to go. I do welcome some measures in the budget. The €5 weekly increase in social protection is welcome, but it's only a 2.5% increase when the cost of living is taken into account. What could be done to lower living costs through public spending would actually impact on people's living costs. For example, 40 million would have provided school books for primary and second level going children, free of charge. The 3.5% increase for the Gardaí is welcome. And it should be focused on community policing. I think it might be. I think that's certainly the intention of the Garda Commissioner in his plan. But we've gone through an extensive justice reform programme. And I don't think there'll be pushback from the government when I say this. We need to ensure that the reforms set out, which are truly groundbreaking, but absolutely urgent and important, are sufficiently resourced so that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. Extra funding for children and youth affairs sounds good in theory, but it seems to be targeted spending rather than the development of a much-needed universal system of childcare and preschool education that would benefit all families. I listened with care to the Taoiseach's speech, and he talked about education being the liberator, the true equaliser. Well, it starts in preschool education. As a former primary teacher, I can tell you that when children come in at primary level, sometimes they never catch up to those that were socialised or had numeracy and literacy before they entered the school door. So early childhood education is a real opportunity to create equality. But that requires very big spending, ultimately. But we can make a start. A higher minimum wage is necessary, given the rise of living costs. And certainly, it is shocking that so many people working in the childcare, early child education sector are working on the minimum wage or a little above. People with graduate level qualifications. And I think that speaks volumes about how much stock and store we put on early childhood education in this country. The minimum wage is €9.80. It's still €2.10 short of a living wage that would permit a basic, even frugal, minimum essential standard of living. The VAT reductions on electronic media to the same 9% newspaper rate is probably a fair reflection of the developments of modern technology and the changes that are happening anyway across the news industry. And I think it will be an important support to newspapers and journalism. The increase to foreign aid is also welcome. But I think we need now to discuss, I just said the increase to overseas aid is very welcome. But I think we need to have a discussion, and maybe you're having it already, about how we can effectively spend that money. One of the concerns I have is that increasingly, because of fear in relation to the spend, that Irish money is increasingly being pooled into UN money or other international funding packages. And the unique spend of Ireland is not as clear-cut. In the past, we've had major initiatives, for example, on hunger. I think we need to go back to specific Irish initiatives, and that means giving the capacity in selected areas of needed support for bespoke Irish programmes that we will fund ourselves. An extra 55 million has been committed to mental health. I think that's really important. I tried every year, in the worst of times, under the significant pressure of Kathleen Lynch, our former colleague, I hasten to add, to ensure that 35 million was allocated additionally every year to mental health provision, because it is an area that we need to acknowledge. This is World Mental Health Day. We should recognise that many people in Ireland experience anxiety and difficulty with their living situation, are in precarious work, in precarious accommodation. And we need to ensure that the supports for people under stress are there. And we don't have them right now. And I can say, particularly in my own region, we don't have them. And those who have been employed there are actually leaving because of the stress of inadequate facilities. It is an area that we have to stop paying lip service to and to prioritise in a real way. And while the best of the Brexit strategy is to push for no Brexit, that is obviously the best outcome for us all, preparation for Brexit should mean strengthening of our economy and its resilience through infrastructure investment. I don't believe that creating a rainy day fund is the solution. I would much prefer the investment in strategic infrastructure like the Port of Rosslare, and I say this in my own constituency. You know, it is telling that you mentioned all the major ports yesterday without mentioning the Europort, Ireland's Europort. And when I asked the Taoiseach that after the development plan was published, his reply to me was that they didn't ask for money. That's not good enough. If Irish Rail are not prepared to invest, it's a national infrastructure that is required and will be required ever more in the context of Brexit. The government's approach to taxation is wrong. I've said that. Tax is not a burden. It's a way decent societies collectively pay for hospitals, schools, childcare and needed enterprise supports to benefit all of us. The decision to spend nearly 300 million on tax cuts, I've argued already, is a mistake. The USC and income tax changes don't really benefit those that are notionally squeezed. Renters, carers and those facing impossibly expensive childcare costs. Rather than giving workers back some small change, the same resources would have really made a significant difference in the services I've talked about. The 284 million spent on the USC and income tax cuts would have provided free school books at primary and secondary school levels, 40 million. Placed a defibrillator in 3,960 schools, 6 million. Continued the area-based childhood programme in deprived areas, 10.5 million. Added capacity to the overset school transport scheme, 2 million. Reduced the student contribution at third level by €1,000, 67 million. Added €100 to the care support grant, 11.8 million. Ensured all public servants were paid at least a living wage. The people who work for the state are paid at least a living wage. That would cost 39.3 million. Restore the trade union tax relief, 26 million. And provide free GP care for all children under 18. The continued rollout of the free GP care system that we did in the worst of times that has been halted since at a cost of 80 million. We could have done all of those things, but the government chose not to do them. Instead, those on the minimum wage will gain, as my colleague told the House yesterday, 15 cents a week. Those on a living wage, 39 cents a week. And those on 70,500, €5.47 a week. I think if they were asked, they would prefer the investment in the way I've set out, in the services that I've set out. As with all budgets, it's not what is said that is the big part of the story. This budget was the first in a decade that was offered an opportunity to government to lead in a new direction after an awful decade. But the government offered no vision and little hope of changed policies to do something dramatic and remarkable on housing, climate change or public services. Stability is the government's new code word for conservative, and the housing system is unstable, the health system is unstable, and the cost of living is unsustainable for most families. As a society, we can do things better. We can afford to build affordable houses. We can afford to develop a truly fair health system. We can afford high-quality services. But that takes leadership. People want a more equal society. They want a social justice and fair society. And we can achieve this if we work collectively. And government and its supporters in this House have rejected yesterday that option and rejected that path.